Hello, this is Dr. Kelly Pearson, and I'm very excited for you to begin this process of these webinars. And we're going to be talking about the basics of how to function as a human being. And while that may sound sort of silly, many of us have forgotten those basics. And we're going to start today with sugar management. Now, where do we begin with all this conversation? It gets somewhat confusing because we're barraged with should we eat proteins or fats or carbohydrates, and if so, how much? Let me put this into perspective. So there's really three types of foods. Proteins are what you can consider our building blocks. So when you're building a home, it's the foundation and it's the walls. It's that structure that holds us together, and we need proteins to build our body for sure. We also need fats. You can think of fats as an analogous component of the house as like the wiring or the plumbing, carrying information and carrying good data and into the home itself. And then the carbohydrates, you can think of actually those things that are flowing into the house, such as the electricity itself, or the gas itself, or the water itself, that helps that house be fueled, if you will, or to function. And what we're talking about today is carbohydrates. Bottom line is all carbohydrates break down into sugar. Some of them break down into sugar fast, some of them break down into sugar slowly. And we're going to talk about that in the upcoming session. Very important concept. But really the point I want to make in this particular section is talking about insulin. Insulin comes from our pancreas, and it really is the hospitality host for when you ingest a carbohydrate, which will break down into sugar. It really is that hospitality host that goes and grabs the sugar that you've ingested and puts it safely into our cells, who can then use it for fuel. So what the heck is diabetes? Well, it's not just a title. It's a very nasty disease which ends up causing us all kinds of consternation, such as pain, such as blindness, such as numbness and tingling, and ultimately necrosis or death of the tissue, resulting in amputation. And it is a very serious problem that we're facing, and we're causing most of it in our life today, as we'll discuss in these sections. But essentially, when you eat a carbohydrate, which ultimately breaks down into sugar, and in this diagram, glucose is the one that is described, although there's many basic simple sugars. The glucose then is absorbed into the bloodstream, and you can see that arrow leading into number 2. And that's dangerous in and of itself in the bloodstream, so the body says, let's get it out of the bloodstream and move it into the cells. That's where the insulin comes in. It is secreted from the pancreas, and you can see in number 3 where it's living in the pancreas, and then it gets excreted and goes into the bloodstream. Now they're attaching to each cell and each sugar molecule and moving that into the body's cells, knocking on the door and saying, hey, do you need some fuel? And the body will say yes or no, and at that point the sugar is placed into the cell where it can function as a good fuel. So what must happen at this point? If you are taking in too much sugar, as in the case of this young lady who's drinking probably about 70 grams of sugar in the soda pop, we'll talk about exactly how much and you can tolerate in a moment, but you have to find a place for that sugar to go. And we're going to talk about what happens when we have taken in more sugar than we have a place to store it. And this is very important, not only as it relates to diabetes, but as it relates to obesity. So part 2 is coming up, and it's going to tell you exactly that. How much sugar can you tolerate? I am not saying sugar is bad. It's the best fuel source ever, and we absolutely need carbohydrates to some degree. But just how much is the next question that we will pose. So stay tuned. Thanks so much.